Every night, a little girl curls up on a freezing playground bench, not because she has no home, but because the truth would destroy a man who thinks he owns the world. But when a cold-hearted millionaire sees her, really sees her, he uncovers a secret so devastating, it breaks him open. Yet this is not just a story. It's a piece of someone's hidden pain quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada? The US? India? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. The wind howled through the empty streets of the city like a mourning mother calling for her lost child. The swings in Lincoln Park creaked under the weight of ghosts only the night could see, and the pale glow of the streetlights cast long, shivering shadows across the sandpit. In the corner of the playground, beneath the red spiral slide that had long since lost its shine, a girl huddled under a worn-out gray blanket. Her frame was so small she looked like part of the shadows, just another forgotten thing in a city too busy to care. Her name was Alara. She was 12 years old and had made this playground her home. Not by choice but by survival. The bench near the seesaw was her dinner table, the slide her shelter from the rain. Every night she lay down on the cold rubber floor, not knowing if she'd wake up. People walked by. They always walked by. Some looked, most didn't. To them, she was invisible. Just another piece of urban decay. But the city was about to stop and look. Not because she asked for help. Not because she cried loud enough. But because a man whose heart had been frozen by decades of wealth and isolation finally noticed. His name was Nolan Greaves. A man who owned half the skyline, but hadn't looked a child in the eye in 30 years. This is not a story about pity. It's not about charity. This is a story about a girl who never gave up, and a man who had already given up everything that mattered. It begins with a question. Why would a little girl choose to sleep in a playground when there are shelters? The answer would shatter the millionaire's world, and build it back again. Nolan Greaves sat in his penthouse office on the 58th floor, sipping scotch older than most of his employees. The city lights below flickered like stars too exhausted to shine. The world called him a genius. The newspapers called him the Ice Titan, a man who built empires with one hand and destroyed competition with the other. He hadn't spoken to his brother in 15 years. His assistant of 7 years didn't know his middle name. His ex-wife said he had a heart carved from stone. And maybe she was right. To Nolan, emotions were liabilities. Compassion was a weakness, and human connection, well, that had cost him everything once. He swore it never would again. Tonight, though, something unusual happened. His limo was delayed. The driver, a meticulous man named Harris, had hit traffic on the Lower East Side, near Lincoln Park. Nolan grumbled, checked his Rolex, and stared out the tinted window. That's when he saw her. A small figure curled under the playground slide, no shoes. Her knees drawn up, blanket too thin to keep out the night. Nolan blinked, then looked again. She didn't move. Was she sleeping? Hurt?
Dead.
Before he could stop himself, he tapped the glass. What is that girl doing there? Harris looked back. She's always there, sir. I've seen her 3 nights in a row. Homeless, I think. Why isn't she in a shelter? No idea, sir. Maybe she ran away. Nolan frowned. Something in his chest twitched, an unfamiliar ache. He told himself to look away, but he didn't. That night he dreamed of the girl. Not once, but over and over. In his dream, her eyes opened, and they were the same eyes as his daughter. The daughter he hadn't seen since she was 6. Nolan tells himself it's none of his business, but the next morning, he sends his private investigator to find out everything about the girl in the playground. What they discover makes his blood run cold. Nolan Greaves hadn't been to Lincoln Park since his 20s, when his startup was just an idea and his bank account blood red. That life, the life with laughter, music, and people who loved him before the skyscrapers, was buried. Now he lived in a world where men wore secrets like suits and paid people to keep them folded tight. So when he tasked his private investigator, Caleb Rourke, with a simple directive, find out who the girl is, he expected a name, a location, maybe a runaway file. What he got was silence, for 2 full days. On the 3rd morning, Nolan's intercom buzzed with Caleb's gravel voicey. Sir, we need to talk. In person. In that phrase, it didn't belong in Nolan's world. Everything could be solved over encrypted calls and bullet point reports. In person meant trouble. 15 minutes later, Caleb walked into the penthouse office, a gray folder clutched under his arm. His face was unusually pale. She's not in any system, Nolan, he began, sliding the folder across the desk. No school enrollment. No missing persons alert. No fingerprints. No guardian claims. She doesn't exist. Nolan narrowed his eyes. That's impossible. I thought so too. So I dug deeper. Found a surveillance feed from a convenience store across from the park. Same time every night, around 9 p.m., She climbs under the slide, wraps herself in that threadbare blanket, and disappears into the shadows. Nolan opened the folder. Inside were photos. Grainy but clear enough. A small girl, no older than 12. Long tangled brown hair. Eyes too old for her face. In one photo, she clutched a plastic grocery bag. In another, she was feeding scraps to a stray dog. She doesn't beg. Doesn't ask for food. Doesn't even talk to people, Caleb said, crossing his arms. I tracked her movements for 5 days. She doesn't leave the park except to dig through the dumpster behind Maxwell's diner. Doesn't go near shelters. Won't take food from strangers. Nolan stared at the images longer than he intended. Something about the girl's expression. It wasn't desperation. It was discipline. Controlled pain. What about DNA? Did she leave anything? Caleb hesitated, then nodded. She uses the water fountain to brush her teeth. Left a hair on the spout. I ran a discreet test through a contact at City Health Services. We got a partial match. To who? Caleb inhaled sharply. Her mother. Deceased. Name was Rowan Grace. Died 2 years ago in a fire. Worked as a waitress. No known relatives. A silence fell between them, heavy as wet concrete. Nolan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Rage, but not the kind that came from business betrayals or contract breaches. This was intimate. Cold sharp. Where was the fire? He asked quietly. On the West End. Low-income housing. Turns out the building was under foreclosure when it caught fire. Guess who owned it? Nolan's hands clenched. He didn't need to guess. It was one of his properties, purchased in a bulk auction of distressed assets 2.5 years ago. He'd never stepped foot there, never reviewed the occupancy files. It was someone else's job to deal with tenant notices and the eviction timelines. He'd signed papers, and that girl's life had burned. She's been alone since then. Nolan asked, voice low. Yes, and from what I can tell, she's smart. She avoids security patrols, keeps her belongings hidden. She's learned to disappear. Nolan looked out the window. The playground was too far to see, but in his mind, he imagined her curled up under that damned slide. How does a 12-year-old survive 2 years on her own? Caleb answered with a slow shake of his head. The way wolves do, quietly, ferociously, and with scars no one sees. And Nolan stood heart-pounding. I want to talk to her. That won't be easy. She doesn't trust anyone. Then I'll make her trust me. Caleb raised a brow. You think money can fix this? Nolan's jaw tightened. No, but maybe for once in my life I can. He didn't say it aloud, but something inside him whispered the truth. He saw his daughter in that girl, and he saw his failure. That night, Nolan leaves his penthouse, steps out of the car near Lincoln Park for the first time in decades, and approaches the playground only to find the girl is gone. No blanket, no bag, no trace. She's vanished. Just when he finally cared enough to show up. The wind had turned colder that night, biting through Nolan's tailored coat like broken glass against silk. He stood motionless at the edge of Lincoln Park, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning every corner of the playground. The swings, the monkey bars, the patch of mulch beneath the red slide. Empty. No blanket. No plastic bag. No child. Elara was gone. For a brief moment, Nolan considered that maybe he had imagined her. Maybe the guilt of the fire, the dead mother, and the weight of his past had conjured up a ghost. But then he saw it. A gum wrapper folded into the shape of a butterfly. It rested near the bottom of the slide, pressed into the dirt like a footprint of hope. He picked it up gently, as if it were glass. His heart pounded in a strange, disorienting rhythm. Not for business, not for ambition, for something human. She was here, he murmured. Behind him, Caleb lingered near the car, eyes wary. Could be she moved on. Saw you coming, spooked. Nolan turned. She's not a rabbit, she's a child. Caleb shrugged. A child who survived alone for 2 years. She's got instincts we can't even begin to understand. Nolan's eyes dropped to the wrapper again, the delicate wings of the candy butterfly catching the faint shimmer of the streetlight. She left this, he said, on purpose. Why would she do that? To show she was here, or maybe to lead someone to her. Caleb raised a skeptical brow. She trusts no one. Nolan looked toward the dim alley behind the park. Then we need to make her believe there's someone worth trusting. The next day, Nolan did something he hadn't done since the launch of his first company. He cleared his calendar. No board meetings, no press calls, no delegation. Instead, he walked the streets near the park, dressed down, no entourage, no limo. He stopped by every convenience store, bakery, and diner within a 4-block radius. Most ignored him, mistaking him for another suit looking for something he didn't belong to, until he reached Maxwell's diner. The waitress there, older, with a warm Midwestern accent, recognized the photo immediately.
Oh yeah, I've seen her,
she said, pouring coffee into his cup. Skinny little thing. Comes by the back dumpster. Doesn't ask for food, but she always leaves a thank you note when she takes something. A thank you note, Nolan echoed. The waitress nodded. Yeah. Sweet little handwritten ones. Thank you. I'll pay you back someday. That kind of thing. Nolan sat back, stunned. She say her name. Nope, never talks, just watches. But one time, maybe 2 weeks ago, I saw her drawing something in chalk. On the sidewalk behind the diner. Do you remember what it was? The woman squinted, trying to recall. It was a big house. Not a mansion, more like a cottage, with a tree next to it, and there was a swing hanging from the tree. She stood there looking at it like she was remembering something real important. Was it still there? Rain washed it away the next day. Nolan thanked her, left a generous tip, and stepped into the alley behind the diner. His eyes scanned the brick walls, the cracked pavement, the rusted fire escape. Then he saw it, another candy wrapper, this time shaped like a star, tucked beneath a loose brick by the dumpster. He pulled it out gently. She was leaving him a trail, breadcrumbs in the wind. That night, he returned to the playground alone. He brought 2 things, a sleeping bag and a thermos of hot cocoa. He laid the sleeping bag near the slide and sat down beside it, the steam rising from the thermos into the cool night air. Hours passed. The city slowed. The moon climbed higher. He almost gave up, but then he heard it, a whisper of breath behind the climbing frame. A scuff of rubber sole against plastic. He didn't turn. I'm not here to hurt you, he said quietly. I know you've had to hide. I know the world hasn't been kind. But I think I was part of that, and I want to make it right. A silence. Then a shadow moved slowly around the edge of the slide. She stood there, Elara, thin, pale eyes, locked on the thermos, on the sleeping bag on him. She said nothing. Nolan offered the cocoa. It's warm, no tricks. She didn't take it. Instead, her voice came, soft, hoarse but firm. I know who you are. He froze. Her eyes burned with a kind of ancient pain no child should know. You're the man who burned my house. His breath caught. No denial came. No defense. Just silence. And then as she turned and ran, Nolan doesn't chase her. Instead, he sits there alone in the cold, realizing for the first time in years that forgiveness isn't something money can buy. But redemption, maybe that can be earned. Nolan Greaves didn't sleep that night. He sat beneath the slide long after Elara had vanished into the dark, holding the untouched thermos in his hands as if it might still carry the warmth she had refused. Her words echoed through his head like a song with no melody, sharp, broken, and unforgettable. You're the man who burned my house. He had no defense, no script. For the first time in decades, Nolan had been stripped of power, stripped of position. All that remained was a man staring at his own reflection in the hollow gaze of a child he had failed without ever meeting. The next morning, he returned to the only place where the truth still clung to walls, the ashes of Elara's past. The building had once been called Hollow Ridge Apartments, a gray bricked structure wedged between an abandoned warehouse and a used tire shop. What remained of it now were scorched walls, half-crumbled staircases, and melted metal skeletons. Nature had begun reclaiming it, with weeds curling through the floorboards and vines gripping onto fractured concrete. The fire had started in apartment 2B, Rowan Grace's unit. Elara's mother, according to the fire department report Caleb had given him, it had been an electrical fault, old wiring, no working smoke alarms, 4 dead, 6 injured. Rowan had been one of the dead. Elara had survived by hiding under the kitchen sink. Nolan's shoes crunched over blackened debris as he stepped inside the ruins. Dust clung to his cuffs. The smell of old smoke still hung in the air, like grief that never left. He found the corner where the swing had once stood. Not a playground swing, but a rope tied to the ceiling beam, holding a makeshift tire, half melted now. There was a photo nailed crookedly to the wall, charred but partially intact. A woman with wild brown curls holding a giggling little girl in her lap. Rowan and Elara. Nolan's breath caught. They were both smiling. Not politely, not for the camera, but like they had invented happiness. He stepped back and something shifted underfoot. A metal box warped from heat partially buried beneath a plank of wood. He knelt and opened it. Inside were drawings, crayon sketches on notebook paper, houses, stars, a dog, a swing, and in the center of one page, written in block letters by a child's hand, "My house is full of light." Nolan sat there on the floor of the ashes, holding the drawing like it was a sacred text. This wasn't just a tragedy. This was her world, and he had helped destroy it without even knowing. By evening, Nolan was back in his penthouse, standing by the window, staring down at the city that had once looked like an empire but now felt like a battlefield. He picked up the phone and called Caleb. "I want the deed records of that building. Every signature. Every person who touched that deal. I want to know how we let that place fall apart." "I'll get it," Caleb replied, though surprise crackled in his voice. "And Caleb, yeah. I want to know if there's anything left in Rowan Grace's name. Anything, a bank account, a mailbox, a photograph. We owe her daughter something." "Understood." Nolan hung up and looked at the drawing one more time. "My house is full of light." The next day he visited the city's child protection services, not with lawyers, but alone. He asked if there were any outreach programs near Lincoln Park, any shelters or support workers who knew the name Elara. He learned 2 things. First, no one knew her. She had successfully avoided every system. Second, there was a social worker named Maria Velasquez who'd once met a girl matching Alara's description 2 years ago, days after the fire. She had tried to offer help, but the girl had run off and was never seen again. She was a ghost even back then, Maria told Nolan. But I remember something strange. She had a list. A list. Maria nodded. She showed it to me for a second. Said her mom made it. Things to do if anything ever happened to her. Like, find the red tree, and don't talk to men with shiny shoes. Weird, protective things. One of the items was, when it's safe, go back to the swing. Nolan's heart skipped. The chalk drawing behind the diner, the swing on the wall in the burn department. It wasn't just a memory. It was a direction. He now knew where she might go next. That evening he returned to Lincoln Park. But this time he didn't come empty-handed. He brought her drawing, framed it, set it beside the slide. He brought a small journal and wrote a note on the first page. I'm sorry I helped break your house. I will help rebuild the light. And then, he left quietly. And from behind the climbing frame, where she always hid in silence, Alara watched. Her eyes didn't soften, but her fingers curled gently around the frame of her mother's drawing. She didn't run this time. As Alara holds the drawing in her lap, a new memory sparks, one she buried deep. Something about her mother's final words. Something Nolan doesn't know, and something that could change everything. The moon hung low and full over Lincoln Park, its silver glow washing the world in a pale hush. Alara sat cross-legged under the slide, the framed drawing cradled in her lap like a living thing. Her small fingers traced the crayon lines of the swing and the crooked tree. She had drawn it when she was just 6, in a moment when the world still made sense. Now, the world was a puzzle missing half its pieces. She stared at the journal Nolan had left. She hadn't opened it yet, not out of fear, but out of something more dangerous. Hope. Hope was a cruel trick. Hope was what kept you waiting for a mother who never walked out of the flames. Hope was what made you believe people meant their promises until they vanished. And yet, he had brought her drawing back, framed it like it was precious. Left her a message. Not asking, not begging, just offering. No one had offered Alara anything in a long time. Her eyes flicked to the journal again. With a deep breath, she flipped it open. The pages were thick and clean, the first one holding his words in dark blue ink. I'm sorry I helped break your house. I will help rebuild the light. And she stared at it for a long time. And she whispered the letter like a question. Her mother's last words echoed in the back of her mind. Words she hadn't let herself think about since the fire, not because she forgot, but because remembering them made the pain real again. It had been a Tuesday. Her mom had just come back from the diner, tired but smiling. Alara was coloring on the kitchen floor, drawing another picture of the house with the red tree, the swing. Then her mom knelt beside her and said something strange. Alara, she'd said gently, if something ever happens to me, remember this: not everyone in a suit is bad. Just the ones who forget how to look. Alara had frowned. Look at what? Rowan had tapped her chest, over her heart. Here. People like us, we don't have money, baby. But we have eyes that see people. Then she kissed her forehead. Hours later the fire came, and her mother never said another word. Alara blinked back the tears now, hugging her knees. Not everyone in a suit is bad. Just the ones who forget how to look. Was Nolan Greaves one of those? Or had he remembered? She didn't know. But she knew one thing: he had come back. More than once. And he hadn't tried to bribe her, threaten her, or drag her into some system. He had brought her mother's memory back into her hands. That meant something. It had to. So, for the first time in 2 years, she picked up a pen. And she wrote back. The next morning Nolan stood by the playground again. The frame drawing was gone. The journal was open. And inside, in a child's neat handwriting, was a message. I remember everything. Even what she said before the fire. She told me to be brave, and to find the swing again when it was safe. I don't think it's safe yet, but maybe it's close. Nolan exhaled. He clutched the page to his chest, stunned by its quiet weight. There was something almost sacred in her words, a child's logic wrapped in grief and fierce independence. She hadn't forgiven him, but she hadn't disappeared either. He sat on the same park bench where she once watched him from a distance and looked around. People passed, parents with strollers, joggers with earbuds, no one aware of the conversation happening in silence between two worlds. He took out his phone and called Caleb. I want something built. Built, Caleb asked. A swing, exactly like the one in her drawing. Same tree, same tire, same angle. Caleb chuckled. You realize swings don't just pop up overnight, right? They will if you pay 5 crews and double their rate. We're. Nolan looked around the edge of the park. East corner. Where the sunlight hits first in the morning. Caleb whistled. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious in my life. 2 days later Alara returned after dark. She always waited until the night softened the world. But something was different. There, standing tall against the moonlight, was a brand new swing. A tire swing, hung from a curved iron branch shaped like a tree. It matched her crayon lines perfectly, every detail exact. Someone had taken her childhood and rebuilt it. She stepped closer. A small note hung from the rope. You said when it's safe, you'd find the swing. It's here. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. And she pressed her hand against the tire, trembling. And for the first time in 2 years, she smiled. Elara finally sits on the swing, and as she sways beneath the stars, a memory rises to the surface, one that reveals a secret about her mother Nolan hasn't discovered yet. A secret that may explain everything. Elara's bare feet brushed the earth as the swing glided gently beneath her, creaking softly in the quiet night. The wind smelled of grass and rusted hope, and her eyes, usually sharp with caution, softened as she tilted her face to the stars. She hadn't been on a swing since the fire. Since before everything good had turned to ash. Now, as the rope stretched and the world leaned with her movement, her muscles remembered something her heart had buried. Laughter. Not loud or careless, but a quiet echo from somewhere deep inside. A small sound escaped her lips, more sigh than smile, but real. The new swing felt like a key, and as the moonlight spilled across her lap, a tune began to hum in the back of her mind. A song her mother used to sing. Elara hadn't heard it in years, but now, rocking back and forth, it rose from the ashes of memory. Where the red tree grows and the stars don't fade, a heart still beats though the world's afraid. Her mother had sung it during storms. When rent was late and Rowan couldn't afford dinner. When the power went out and they huddled under blankets. The melody was soft, the lyrics unfinished, always changing. But the chorus stayed the same. You'll find me there, with light in my hand, when you don't run and learn to stand. Elara's lips moved with the words silent but certain. She remembered it all now. Her mother's voice, the warmth, the way she'd brushed Elara's hair behind her ear and whispered, "That's our song, baby girl. If you ever get lost, follow the words, they'll lead you back." Back to what? Elara looked down at the playground, now sleeping beneath her feet. The swing, the drawing, the journal. This was the path. But the song had one more verse, a part she hadn't thought of in years. It wasn't in the tune itself, but in something her mother once told her while humming that very melody. Something strange. Something hidden. "Elara," her mom had said, on a night when the wind rattled their windows, "if anything happens to me, don't just follow the swing. Look behind the song." What's behind it? She'd asked. Truth. Elara's eyes widened. It hadn't made sense then, but maybe it did now. She jumped off the swing and ran back to the slide, digging into her old hiding place. Under a broken panel of plastic, she kept her treasure stash, papers, candy wrappers, and the few photos that survived the fire. She pulled out a crumpled envelope she'd carried for 2 years. It was the only letter her mother had written to her, dated 1 week before the fire. Elara had never opened it. She couldn't bear to. But now maybe she was ready. Her fingers trembled as she tore the flap. Inside was a single page, a note, and something folded beneath it. The note read, "My Elara, if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to explain. But you deserve the truth. I once loved a man who changed when the world changed him. He became hard, cold. But I always believed, deep in my heart, that one day he'd remember who he used to be. And if that man ever came back to you, if he ever found you, I need you to know something. He's your father." Elara couldn't breathe. Her heart thudded wildly in her chest. Hands shaking, she pulled out the folded paper behind the note. It was a photograph. Rowan and Nolan, young, smiling, her mom in his arms. On the back was written in inky, "Nolan and Rowan, before the storm." Tears blurred her vision. She remembered now tiny flashes. A man with stubble who gave her a teddy bear. A voice that read her bedtime stories in winter. A deep laugh that stopped too soon. She thought he was a dream. But he wasn't. Nolan Graves wasn't just a man in a glass tower. He was her father. Next morning, Nolan was back in the park, sitting on the same bench with a new journal entry waiting in his coat pocket. He didn't see her coming. Elara appeared from the mist like a question mark with eyes. She stood before him, clutching the letter and photo to her chest. He stood up slowly, unsure, nervous for the first time in a boardroom or a park. "I didn't know," he whispered. "About Rowan. About you." Elara's voice cracked. "But you loved her." "Yes," he said, with no hesitation. "She was the best part of me. Before I became someone else." Elara looked down. "Why didn't you stay?" Nolan swallowed hard. "I was afraid. I ran from everything good before I even realized I had it." Her chin trembled. "I waited." "I know," he whispered, kneeling. "And I'm so sorry, Elara, for leaving, for not finding you sooner, for everything." She stared into his eyes for a long, long moment. Then she stepped forward and placed the photo into his hands. As Nolan holds the image of his lost past, Elara speaks 4 words that drop him to his knees. "I remember you, Dad." The photo trembled in Nolan's hands as if it held fire. His eyes locked on the woman smiling in the frame. Rowan, her arms wrapped around him, her laughter frozen in time. He couldn't look away, not from the softness of her eyes, or the tilt of her head that used to nudge into his shoulder when they danced in the kitchen, long before his empire was built on cold ambition. Then there was Alara, standing before him, not as the ghost he had once passed in the dark, but as something more powerful, his daughter. He wanted to speak, to say her name aloud, to feel it settle on his tongue like something he'd never allowed himself to say. But the guilt choked him. Alara watched him quietly, eyes not angry, not trusting, just searching, as if looking through layers of him, peeling past the headlines, the polished suits, the reputation that had frightened grown men, trying to find someone worth remembering. "I thought you were a dream," she whispered finally. He swallowed. "And I thought you were my punishment?" Her brows furrowed. "I thought," he hesitated, lowering himself to the bench, unable to meet her eyes. "I thought losing Rowan was the price I paid for who I became, for chasing everything and losing everything that mattered." Silence grew between them, a slow aching quiet. Then Alara sat beside him, not too close, but not far either. She clutched the photo tightly. "I used to talk to you in my head," she said softly. "At night, in the park, when it got too cold, I pretended you were coming back." Nolan closed his eyes. "Some nights I hated you. Other nights I missed you. But I never said your name. Why? Because I was scared it would hurt more if I said it and you weren't real." Nolan opened his mouth. No words came. Just a hollow breath that caught in his throat. "But," she added slowly, "my mom never told me you were gone forever. She used to hum that song, and she always left the door unlocked at night. I think she believed you might come home." He looked at her then. "I wanted to," he whispered. "Every day. I just didn't know how to come back from what I'd become." A tear traced Alara's cheek, but she didn't brush it away. "I don't need perfect," she said quietly. "I just need true." Nolan's throat tightened. "Then I'll be that. If you'll let me." They sat there for a long time, the swing creaking slowly in the wind behind them, the city waking around them like a story turning its page. Finally, Alara reached into her coat and pulled out the journal, the one he had left her. She flipped to the back and passed it to him. On the last page, in shaky handwriting, she had written, "You can be my dad. But only if you mean it. No lies, no leaving, no pretending. Reeve, even if it's hard." He read it once, then again, his vision blurred. He looked up at her. "I mean it." She gave a small nod, then whispered, "Then I think I'll say your name now." His heart stopped. Dad. It was soft, fragile, but it shattered something in him. Years of ice cracked. Guilt that had built up like stone inside his ribs broke apart. He leaned forward, his hand gently covering hers. "I'm here, Alara. I'm not going anywhere." "Not again." "I don't want a mansion," she said, "or fancy stuff. I just want a door that locks, a kitchen that smells like pancakes, and someone who comes home." He smiled. "Then we'll build it together. A real home." She looked at him, cautious hope glimmering in her eyes. "Can we make it have a swing?" He laughed softly. "It'll have two." That afternoon, Nolan made a decision that shocked his entire corporation. He stepped down from the daily operations of Greaves Industries. For years, he had micromanaged everything. Contracts, expansions, even the color of the lobby chairs. But now, he handed over the reins. He needed time to learn how to be a father, not a CEO. With Caleb's help, he found a small home on the city's quieter side. One with a yard, an old tree, and a porch swing that squeaked just right. And in the attic, they built something together. A memory room. Photos of Rowan, drawings from Alara, a journal shelf. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. 1 week later, on a cloudy Saturday, Alara sat at the kitchen table, pancakes in front of her, a crayon in hand drawing something. Nolan walked in, flower on his shirt, looking less like a billionaire and more like a dad who had forgotten how to fold the kitchen towels. "What are you making?" he asked. Alara grinned. "A new map? For what? For our future?" She held up the drawing, a red tree, 2 swings, and 3 people standing beneath them. One of them was her. The second was her mom, smiling from a cloud. And the third had Nolan's eyes. But as peace begins to settle into Alara's world, an unexpected letter arrives in the mail, from someone connected to Rowan's past, and it holds a truth that could change everything. Again, it arrived on a Thursday. A plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot, landing softly on the wooden floor of their new home. No stamps, no return address. Just Alara's name written in careful block letters across the front, the ink slightly smudged, as if the sender's hands had trembled while writing it. Nolan spotted it first, returning from the market with a bag of apples and Alara's favorite cinnamon rolls. He bent down, picked it up, and stared at the handwriting. He didn't recognize it, and that scared him more than he cared to admit. "Alara," he called gently, setting the letter on the kitchen table. "There's something here for you." She emerged from the den, her sleeve smudged with charcoal, a sketch pad tucked under her arm. "For me?" He nodded. No return address. Hand delivered. She looked at it for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then slowly, cautiously, she sat down and opened it. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. No date, no greeting. But the first line made her heart stop. If you're reading this, I owe you the truth about who your mother really was. Alara's fingers gripped the paper tighter. Nolan stepped closer, concern etched into every line of his face. May I? He asked softly. She nodded, her eyes wide. He sat beside her, and they read the letter together. Rowan Grace wasn't just a waitress. Before she met Nolan Greaves, she was part of something bigger. A group, a project. We called it the Haven Initiative, a small underground network of women helping runaway youth, mostly girls, escape abusive homes and systems that failed them. Rowan was our brightest light. She took risks others wouldn't. She didn't just feed these girls. She taught them how to protect themselves, how to read contracts, how to survive. She left the Haven when she became pregnant. Said she wanted a quiet life, one where her daughter wouldn't have to carry the weight of the world. But she never stopped helping, even after she left Nolan, even after the threats started. Thus Ilara's chest tightened. Threats. Nolan leaned in, lips pressed in a thin line. The letter continued. Affess, I don't know who sent them. Developers, landowners, men who lost money when she prevented buildings from being flipped and turned into condos. She stopped evictions. Made enemies. A week before the fire, Rowan told me she found something. Documents hidden in a real estate file, she said, connected a major firm to illegal displacements. She wouldn't name the company. She said, if anything happens to me, Ilara has to know the truth. She's the only thing that matters. I'm sorry I waited this long. I couldn't keep the secret anymore. Rowan didn't die in a random fire. She was silenced, and I think someone knew it was coming. Ilara's hands were shaking now. Her mother wasn't just a victim. She was a target. Nolan sat back, the world spinning around him. I thought it was negligence of faulty wires. But the puzzle pieces were falling into place, sharp and cutting. He remembered the fire report. No investigation. No insurance payout. The property flipped a month later, cleaned and sold at triple the value. He had signed those documents, under a shell company managed by another shell company. And someone had buried the paper trail so deep, no one ever questioned it. Until now. I was part of the system that killed her? Nolan whispered, horrified. Ilara didn't speak. She stood up, her face pale, the letter still in her hands. But her eyes didn't hold fear. They held fire. That night, Nolan called Caleb. I need to know everything about the Haven Initiative, he said, pacing the living room. I need names, files, and especially who owned Hollow Ridge before and after the fire. You think this goes deeper? Caleb asked. I think I've been asleep at the wheel of a machine that destroys lives. And I think the woman I loved was trying to stop it. Caleb paused. You're not that man anymore. No, Nolan said, but I still carry his sins. And now, I have a daughter who deserves answers. Later, in the quiet of her room, Ilara sat with the letter again, reading each word until they etched into her bones. Her mother hadn't been weak. She hadn't just endured the world. She had fought it, with everything she had. And now it was Ilara's turn. She opened her sketchbook and began to draw, not houses or swings but fire, a woman standing in the middle of it, holding a child in one hand and a sign in the other. The sign read, Truth Doesn't Burn. As Nolan and Ilara prepare to uncover the truth behind Rowan's death, Caleb calls with a discovery. The shell company that flipped the building after the fire was still active, and its current CEO had once been Nolan's best friend. The rain fell hard against the wide windows of Nolan's study, washing the world outside in gray as thunder rolled across the horizon. Ilara sat near the fireplace, curled beneath a knitted blanket, staring at a map of the city with pins marking former Haven Initiative safe houses and demolished buildings, nearly all of them in Nolan's past portfolios. Across the room, Nolan's phone buzzed. He grabbed it. Caleb. He answered instantly. Tell me. Caleb's voice was low, measured. The shell company is called Maris Holdings, registered offshore, but I traced it through 3 layers of dummy entities. Nolan's heart pounded. And it's managed by Braden Locke. Nolan went still. Braden Locke, his best friend from university, his first business partner, the man who'd taught him how to manipulate contracts and shift blame. They built their first 3 properties together. They built their empire together. Nolan clenched his jaw. He knew about Hollow Ridge. I bought it for a penny on the dollar 3 weeks before the fire, Caleb said, then sold it post-fire through another front company. He's done this more than once, Nolan. A lot more. Nolan stared at the floor. And I helped him. You signed off on a lot of it, Caleb replied gently. But that doesn't mean you knew. Nolan didn't respond. He ended the call. Ilara looked up. Who is it? Someone I trusted. She waited. He crossed the room and sat beside her, Braden Locke. Her eyes narrowed. You knew him. He was like a brother once. Brilliant. Ruthless. We started out building things. Real things. Then it became about profit, flipping, selling, forgetting the people who lived in the buildings. He paused. Rowan tried to warn me once. I thought she was being overly emotional. I didn't listen. Ilara's voice was quiet but sharp. And now she's dead. Nolan flinched. There was no defense. No rebuttal. Only silence. The next morning, Nolan called Braden. "Meet me at the glass house," he said. Braden laughed deep and polished. "Haven't heard that voice in years. You sound haunted." "I want answers." Braden's voice dropped. "You sure you want them?" "Yes." "All right then." 1 hour. The glass house was a penthouse lounge wrapped in chrome and marble, perched on the 40th floor of one of the city's newest towers, a tower Nolan and Braden had built together. It shimmered with luxury, but Nolan felt nothing as he walked in. Only the weight of betrayal. Braden stood at the bar nursing a scotch. He turned his grin sharp. "Nolan, my God, you look older." "You look the same," Nolan said flatly. "Cold." Braden chuckled. "Still dramatic. I know about Hollow Ridge. I know you bought it before the fire." Braden swirled his drink. "You're gonna have to be more specific. We've bought a lot of buildings. It was never an accident, was it?" Braden said nothing. Nolan stepped closer. "Did you have her killed?" A beat of silence. Then Braden sighed. "You always had such a romantic view of the world. But here's the truth. Rowan Grace was in the way. She was causing problems, blocking acquisitions, rallying people against us. You lit the fire." Braden shrugged. "I didn't. But someone did. And I didn't stop it." Nolan's hands curled into fists. Braden leaned in. "You're complicit too, old friend. You signed the transfer. You approved the flip. You were just too busy climbing the mountain to look down and see the bodies." Nolan's stomach turned. "But now you're back," Braden said, amused. "Trying to be a father." "I hear of that girl. Ilara, she's hers, isn't she?" "She's mine," Nolan said, steel in his voice. Braden smiled, chilling. "You're too late to fix what we broke. The machine's already running." "Then I'll burn it down," Nolan said. Braden laughed. Nolan walked away without another word. Back at home, Ilara was on the floor, surrounded by documents Caleb had delivered. Records from the Haven, articles about displaced families, and old receipts bearing Locke's signature. She looked up when Nolan entered. "You saw him?" Nolan nodded. He admitted it. Ilara swallowed hard. "So what now?" Nolan sat beside her, hands heavy. "We expose him. We take everything to the press, the mayor, the city council. We find the other victims. We build a case." And Ilara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're willing to destroy your name." "I already destroyed it," he whispered. "Now I'm just trying to make sure yours can be safe." She blinked, tears brimming. He added, "I won't let him touch you." And for the first time in weeks, Ilara moved toward him, small, tentative. She leaned her head on his shoulder, just for a moment, just enough. As they prepare to go public, Caleb bursts into the house, face pale. "The press won't touch it," he says. "Braden just bought out 3 of the biggest networks. He's silencing the story before it can breathe." The city was quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. Above, the clouds churned like unspoken guilt, a sky waiting to weep. In the heart of that silence stood Nolan Hart, once a man of cold steel and glass towers, now a man forever changed by a girl who slept in the shadows of his empire. Rowan Grace's story had finally been told. The courtroom had fallen silent when Ilara stood, her small hands clutching a folded note, her mother's last words, her voice shaking but resolute. She died protecting people no one else saw. You saw buildings. She saw souls. And now the world sees her too. Braden Locke sat motionless, his empire collapsing under the weight of exposed truth. What wealth he had built through corruption now turned to ash. Nolan watched him, not with revenge, but a strange pity. The kind reserved for a man who never knew what it meant to truly love anything. When the gavel fell and Locke was taken into custody, Ilara didn't smile. She simply whispered, "It's over, Mom." But it wasn't really over, not in the hearts of those who had survived in the dark, unheard and unseen. Weeks later, Hollow Ridge Shelter was rebuilt, not with grand blueprints, but with community hands. Brick by brick, story by story, life was returning to a place once left for dead. Nolan had quietly purchased the land and donated it anonymously. He never wanted credit. He only wanted peace. Ilara had a room now, her own room, with blue curtains, a bookshelf filled with secondhand novels, and a worn piano placed by a neighbor who remembered Rowan's favorite lullaby. Sometimes at night she played softly, and people came just to sit in silence and listen. No stage, no spotlight, just healing notes in a bruised world. Nolan came by often, never imposing. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes just a book, and sometimes he brought nothing but quiet company. Ilara would greet him with a smile that looked more and more like her mother's each day. One evening, she asked him, "Why did you keep coming back?" He looked at her, eyes filled with a grief that had reshaped itself into gratitude. "Because I think saving you saved me." She reached across the old table and held his hand. You didn't save me. You listened to me. That was enough. Later that night, Nolan visited Rowan's grave again. This time he brought no files, no apology letters, no guilt. Just a single red rose and a trembling breath. I didn't see you, he whispered. I was blind. But your voice, it reached me through your daughter. She's you, fire and heart. And I'll never let her sleep in the cold again. A breeze rustled through the trees, soft and warm. Somewhere in the sky the clouds finally opened, not in storm but in light rain, gentle, cleansing, almost like forgiveness. The next morning, a letter arrived at the shelter, handwritten. It was from one of the young boys who used to sleep under the jungle gym beside Alara months ago. It read, Dear Alara, I saw you on the news. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Because of you, I'm back in school. I sleep in a bed now. My mom is off the streets too. You changed everything. I just wanted to say thank you. She folded the letter slowly, tears falling onto the ink. That night, she returned to the playground, not to sleep, but to remember. She sat on the swing, gently swaying, looking up at the stars that had once been her only company. Nolan found her there. Cold? He asked. She shook her head, just remembering. I used to wonder if anyone would ever notice me here. He sat on the swing beside her. They did. The whole world did. Ilara looked up. No, she said softly. You did. First. For the first time, Nolan Hart, the man once known for having no heart at all, felt something rise in his chest that he had buried long ago. Hope, and with the wind brushing gently through the trees, with the echoes of pain slowly fading into the past, they sat quietly, two souls once broken, now healing together. No cameras, no courtrooms, no noise, just the stillness of peace finally earned. A cold millionaire once built towers for the powerful. Now he builds shelter for the forgotten. And a girl who once slept on a playground now sings lullabies to children who no longer sleep alone. Because sometimes, saving one life changes the world. And sometimes, that life saves you right back.
A lonely millionaire discovers a poor girl sleeping in a playground and learns she's homeless because of choices tied to his own past. What begins as pity turns into heartbreak when he realizes her story is connected to his life in ways he never imagined. In helping her, he doesn't just save the girl, he finally saves himself.